ado, I am delighted to introduce Adrienne Johnson, who is the Library Program Associate for the Denver Public Library, and Beck Zarnicki. Beck, did I pronounce that right? I meant to ask you about the pronunciation of your name. And she is the assistant to the city librarian at Denver Public. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you guys, and we'll have you take it away.
Waiting. Well, while I'm waiting, oh, there it is. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm glad you all got to attend today. My name is Adrienne again, and I work here at the Denver Public Library downtown in Denver. And I'm gonna go over real quickly before we get started some introductions and class objectives for today, as well as some norms that for our expectations and everything like that. So let's get started. Our objectives for today, I'll go ahead and kind of outline what they are to build a foundation for fostering gender inclusivity at your library. So I hope you can take that away from this session. We also aim to give empathetic and equitable service to all of our customers. We also strive to give you knowledge of social and legal issues that impact transgender customers, so y'all can have some context when approaching these conversations. And we're also going to challenge you to combat your assumptions and discuss ways to encourage inclusivity in your language and action in your own library. And our norms for today, when we do our session, we always like to start out this way. We like to encourage people to assume good intent when we're approaching our conversations with each other, to call people back in rather than out, to step up and step back. And we kind of like to highlight that as meaning like expressing your reflections on the subject and also giving room for others to do so as well. And when in doubt, use people first language. For example, a person experiencing homelessness or a person of trans experience rather than highlighting what makes them different. I think that's it as far as our little introduction. So I'm going to switch over to Beck, who will take us through one of our first exercises. Oh, and for the structure of our presentation, we'll be doing some interactive exercises with you guys, and we'll be paying attention to the chat that we're seeing in the corner over there. We'll go over some terminology, some legal stuff. Then in the second half of our presentation, we'll go over ways that apply specifically to libraries and how you can bring stuff back with you after this. But yeah, first exercise. Here we go.
All right, everybody, this is Beck. So we want to talk a little bit about assumptions. You know, we all have frames for how we look at the world and how we approach life. And these can be shaped by many factors, whether it's culture, religion, politics, or families. And so we all see the world in a certain way. What we're hoping to do today a little bit is to help you shift those frames and think about the ways that, you know, and the times that there are things that lie outside of those frames that we have. You know, what else is in the universe? So we like to start talking about the assumptions that we make. And I'd like to ask everybody to take a moment and just reflect on if there have ever been times that people have made assumptions about you that were not true, and they can be small things or they can be big things. And if you're willing to share them, we'd love to see you reflect on some of those things in the chat. Yeah, I see somebody, Kathleen shared, people consistently assume that I'm not disabled and straight. As a kid, from Jen, you're quiet, you're so you're stuck up. Yeah. Because I'm hard of hearing, I've had people assume that I can't do work fully. These are great. I really appreciate people sharing so honestly. In my experience, librarians tend to think all librarians are very liberal. Because I'm overweight, that I'm lazy. And then also, sorry, about the librarians are liberal, but they're not. Assume I must be a mother because I'm married to a man and identify as a woman. Yeah. These are great. I have a chronic illness and people always assume I'm faking being sick. Yeah, I really appreciate people sharing these. As a teenager, if you're quiet, that you have nothing to say or nothing value to contribute. Because I'm short, people assume that I'm young and inexperienced. Assuming that I'm straight, lazy because I'm big. Yeah, and so I really do appreciate this level of sharing. And I'll tell you, so what we tend to do in an exercise in class is usually we will pair people up and kind of ask, we'll put assumptions out to people. And it'll be things like, are you a coffee or a tea drinker? And so we have people pair up and silently kind of make an assumption about someone else. And we like to escalate them. So whether they're a coffee or a tea drinker, a saver or a spender, religious or non-religious, Democrat or Republican, to the point of making assumptions about people being liberal. And when we do this, we reflect on these to get people to think, how did that feel to know someone was maybe making a judgment about you, an assumption about you, based off of maybe some pretty limited information? And so going off of both what you've been willing to share and sort of this idea is, particularly when you're being offered two choices like this, how does that make you feel? And what do you kind of think about that? It can make you feel unseen. Yeah? Yeah, it can be very upsetting. These are things that are very personal to us. I don't like being put in a box, angry. Yeah, and these are things that are really legitimate because it's particularly like you're presenting incorrectly, devalued. Yeah, because these are things that get to the core of us, right? Disappointing when folks see you at a surface value. Makes me feel like people think I'm not good at my job. Yeah. These are all amazing points, and to the point of like Democrat or Republican, dimensionless, exactly, that sometimes we don't fit in the boxes people most that occur to them about. Disappointing when people think you're indecisive. Sorry, the chat jumped. I work extra hard to make sure, I make myself sick because I work extra hard to make sure no one thinks I'm lazy, right? Like all these things we have to, everyone is multifaceted. Yeah, and that's just it. It enables self-isolating behavior. Yeah, it's impossible, right, to really know anything about a person just by looking at them. And so when we're dealing with issues as personal as gender, and I'll acknowledge that I am non-binary and very femme-presenting, so I relate to some of these things that are coming up, that we all have to take a step back, and when we're dealing with people in sort of customer service scenarios and whatever, and try to let that person we're interacting with guide the interaction, to take the cues from them about how they'd like to be treated. And so when we look at moving these frames, to just remember to the best of our ability, and it's very difficult because a lot of us do, kind of go to certain visual cues or whatever, vocal cues or certain things, but to the best of our ability to treat people as a blank slate. So this is really good. Again, I really appreciate everyone's honesty. As we talk about this. And now I'll turn it back over to Adrian because we would like to spend a little time covering some terminology for people who might not be as familiar.
All right, so shifting gears a little bit away to some more concrete verbiage going on here. So there are a lot of ways that we describe sort of the unique parts about ourselves. If you haven't heard any of these terms before, that's totally fine. If you have, that's also okay. But we'll go over a couple of basic terms you might come across when having these discussions. There's also a handout in the documents section of our presentation called Gender Identity Definitions. It covers a bit more in-depth stuff as well, so feel free to refer to that as you're working through this. But essentially, as a quick explanation, someone's gender identity is each person's internal experience and understanding of their own gender. That's a private experience that we all have in the world. Gender expression, which I have at the bottom right corner over there, is how we present ourselves to the world. Our clothes, our hairstyle, our body language. For example, a person might identify as a woman, but have gender expression that's more traditionally masculine, etc., and various combinations of expressions. At the bottom left corner over there, your sex assigned at birth is the assignment we're given, of course, when we're born. Typically, a doctor just looks at the baby and checks one of two gender boxes, male or female. For people who identify as cisgender, gender identity and assigned sex at birth tend to stay the same. For trans people, gender identity may be different than your assigned sex at birth, and it may fluctuate as you go about your life. Finally, in the top right corner up there, we wrote sexual and romantic orientation. That's who we're attracted to. It's a separate concept from gender identity, which I think gets kind of confused a lot. But a person can be transgender and identify as straight, gay, queer, or another orientation of that sort. And in many LGBTQ communities, it's common to think of gender particularly as a spectrum, rather than those two rigid binary boxes that we get assigned to at birth. And this is also increasingly becoming a practice in professional fields, from social work and healthcare, and in libraries as well. Oh, there's animations. They're still here. Sorry, everyone. Please enjoy the silly illustrations. All right. So I'll turn it over once more to Beck, who will outline more about why we're talking about this right now.
Yeah, so we like to discuss this because, so legal rights for transgender folks vary greatly from state to state. In many Western states, it's especially difficult for trans people to obtain an ID that accurately reflects who they are. Recently, in Colorado, people are able to update their name and gender on their ID or driver's license. It does need to be authorized by a doctor, and fees are required. For birth certificate changes, you do need a court order saying that sex has been changed by surgical procedure.
And for each state where you have a birth certificate, it's also incredibly different.
Yes.
And each one has like their own regulations and requirements and stuff. So also something to keep in mind.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it really is kind of runs the gamut. Thanks, Adrian. Mm-hmm. There are obvious problems with these processes. Some trans people do not want or can't afford gender confirmation surgeries. The administrative process still tends to operate on a binary system and does not allow room for individuals who identify outside of male or female. That's starting to change in some states. Colorado does have a non-binary option for IDs. And also, if people want more information on this, the website Trans Equality has more state-by-state info on these processes. Just going to read this. Transgender people face extraordinary levels of physical and sexual violence, whether on the streets, at school, or work, at home, or at the hands of government officials. And so there is so much resilience and camaraderie in trans communities, but this is still very much a reality. More than 1 in 4 trans people have experienced a bias-driven assault, and rates are higher for trans women and trans people of color. So that's why we feel it's so important to talk about this and to make sure that in our libraries we are as welcoming as possible and treating our trans customers just as we treat any other customers. Like, this is about just a really high standard of wonderful customer service.
Phew. All right, that was a lot of information that we chucked out at you guys. So keep that context in mind while we're going over some more library specific stuff, and feel free to ask us any questions as well, or delve through the handouts at your own leisure afterward. But why, I guess, is this an issue for our libraries today? So, as we kind of discussed with Beck and everything, we know that trans people often experience high levels of harassment and discrimination and are often pushed away from public life, and often feel isolated for a number of reasons. And sadly, this is included from our government and other authority figures, which can impact how trans people access services and impact our interactions as well with customers. So we always do like to emphasize that in our profession as library employees, no matter what our job is, we operate by a common code of ethics. And I know everyone strives to provide the highest level of service to everyone in our library, whether that's by having appropriate and organized resources, equitable service policies, equitable access to services, and an accurate, unbiased, and courteous responses to all interactions that we have with our customers. Now we're going to kind of take that and discuss how we can put it into practice when it all comes to creating welcoming spaces in our libraries that are inclusive around gender identity. Real quick, here is our code of ethics, which I talked about earlier, but keep that in mind. I realize that some of yours from out of state might be a little bit different, but I know we all kind of have a common ground about the specifics of our library.
Okay, so we're going to talk through now some sort of scenarios and things that might come up in your libraries. We will also have, I know you've been listening so wonderfully to us. We will also be coming up on some more interaction, just so you know, so hang with us. So welcoming spaces. You know, one of the things we can do in our libraries that's really important is, you know, the cues we offer people who come in and the first impression they get. A reader's advisory bookmark highlighting children's books with transgender and other LGBTQIA themes sends a message of welcome to anyone who enters a space, particularly for trans youth who might be especially vulnerable to discrimination at school or at home. These resources can have a really powerful impact. I can speak to, I know that one of our children's librarians who sometimes does this training with us has some very personal connections to the kids who come into our space. And that sometimes, you know, children that you have a relationship with at the library will share things with you that they might not share with other people. So it's a really good opportunity to build strong relationships. So we want to make sure they feel comfortable in our spaces. And so also, sorry, I missed my slide cue here. So just also, again, display trans resources, offer programming on trans issues, develop a welcoming workforce. We do a variation of this training with our own staff, which we offer at least a couple times a year, so to help everybody come up to speed. And now we're going to talk a little bit about interactions.
All right. So whenever we are at work in our library, our work is built on building relationships with people. That might mean with our colleagues, a brief moment of connection for the first time we help a customer, or the relationships we build with people we see every single day. So we're going to talk about what some strategies we can use to welcome trans customers in those interactions. And for these next couple of activities, we're going to read out some scenarios, some hypothetical scenarios that might play out in your library. and we'll discuss what went well in the scenario, what were some of the sticking points you want to take with you, what you might change, etc. So our first interaction, and I'll go ahead and narrate this as well. But for example, a customer walks up to a staff person for assistance, and the staff member refers to that customer as sir. The customer tells the staff member that they do not go by sir and does not offer an alternative. The staff member is visibly embarrassed and goes on to make assurances about the customer's appearance. The staff member then assists the customer, asks for their name, and addresses them by their name when they leave. So that's one kind of hypothetical example that might seem very familiar to you as well, but we'll give you guys a few minutes to kind of think about that for yourselves. And then if you wouldn't mind going back to the chat box and kind of outlining some things you thought go well in this interaction that we have up there, some stuff that you would change, and maybe even if you have had a similar interaction in your own library and how it went, and if you have any suggestions for other people in our group today too. Yeah, ask for and use preferred pronouns. Yeah.
Well, and we'll circle back.
I would have skipped any comments on the customer's appearance and just acknowledged their wish not to be called sir. Yeah, I see that again right below about making assurances about their appearance. And yeah, it is great that the staff member addressed them by their name. That works in so many situations too. So it's definitely a universal respect. Avoided making assumptions, yeah. As far as I know, a quick apology and then change how you address them, yeah. I also see it's good practice to avoid saying sir or ma'am to patrons in general, yeah. And I know a lot of us were kind of like, that was ingrained as we were growing up as a sign of politeness too. So switching that is kind of challenging. I recommend y'all or everyone. I have a coworker who calls people friends or folks when they come in. Not using any gendered language. Just ask if they need help, but asking the name of or preferred pronouns. Wouldn't make a comment or assurances on the customer's appearance, yeah, or experience. Yeah, use it as a learning experience. Yeah. I would try to avoid excessive apologizing as well. It probably prolongs the discomfort. Yeah, I think that's phrased extremely well, because it would kind of escalate the awkwardness of the situation.
Yeah, and when you excessively apologize too, one of the things we talk about is that makes it about you and not about that's about your embarrassment. So it's good to remember to just focus on, you can process that on your own time later, but.
Yeah, but making sure they feel welcome, of course, doesn't mean like apologizing too much and making them feel embarrassed, or, if other people are around, they might feel really self-conscious about that interaction too. Knowing the person's name could also get into some privacy issues. Yeah, but I mean, the customer can share what they want with you. Like, you're not really entitled to know the specifics of someone. Yeah, it's not about us, it's about the patron's comfort. Yeah. Yeah, I think you all have a lot of great suggestions and input into this, but I'm definitely hearing a lot of common themes, like not apologizing excessively about it, but just acknowledging, like, oh, sorry, and then addressing them by the name of the customer. And I also saw a lot of y'all mentioned asking for someone's pronouns. There's a lot of varying perspectives on that interaction, because I know some people do value that, interaction and having the chance to, I guess, articulate who they are and how they want to be addressed. But I know that also asking that question can be kind of on the spot and can still be like vaguely awkward for that person. I personally tend to kind of not make an assumption unless they choose to introduce that for themselves in their own like interaction. For example, I have a really quick example actually. We have a younger teen intern in one of our maker spaces right now, and I was like getting to know him and stuff, and I had made an assumption about who they were as a teen. And I had saw them like making like a name badge and stuff, and they had wrote their pronouns on it because they had chosen to do that. And so just taking that like quiet self-introduction about who they were and then respecting that is a
Totally.
good example.
And the cue here a little bit is the fact that this person doesn't offer an alternative to begin with. So it is just about, because it can be a little outing, so that's why the recommendation here, and again, these are all nuanced, you have to read the situation, is to maybe just ask somebody's name, potentially. But yeah, to just kind of do the best you can to navigate some of these. And I do love the idea of thanking somebody to be like, oh, thank you for telling me. And then, if you introduce yourself, I'm so-and-so. And that also just opens up an opportunity for that customer to tell you how they would like to be addressed. So, and if they don't give you a name, they're just like, oh, nice to meet you, then just run with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess also to sum up, like our language is changing so quickly too in order to be more inclusive. So like if you do like say something, even with the best of intentions, that you kind of pick up on doesn't go well, just apologize quickly, move on, and kind of let them, have agency in that conversation.
Yeah. And the other thing is, we are also not telling you to not say sir or ma'am to customers you have a relationship with and know, and who maybe really appreciate that honorific. That is still totally okay. And again, this is about like building relationships and meeting people where they are. Okay, so we had our little summary slide there. So now we're just going to spend a moment on card registration. We don't have a scenario for this one, just for sake of time. But for customer accounts, sometimes we do have to ask for people's IDs to access their accounts. And the big thing here is to just be sensitive when you're identifying or verifying information. So, first of all, use, of course, this is just a good reminder, generally use welcoming body language, protect privacy, capture correct names, avoid collecting gender info. At DPL, we do not collect people's gender. But some of this gets just a little tricky from a standpoint of what we logistically can do with our ILS systems. So right now, one of the things we are trying to navigate at DPL is collecting the names people would like to use. Oh, and I just see that somebody said, we just stopped collecting gender info, and that was a huge relief. Yeah. Yes, I know, right? Congrats. So, first of all, you might come into a situation where, the name somebody gives you is not what is on their ID. Just be sensitive to that. If you do need to verify something, you can always ask for another piece of information. Again, this is just trying to not call someone out. Here now when we're trying to get people's preferred names into our system, so we use Polaris, which actually doesn't allow for that, which is frustrating. And we had kind of looked at different workarounds. We are really excited because right now I think we are on the verge of getting an enhancement where we will be able to collect people's preferred names, which is wonderful for a variety of reasons, because it is not just trans customers who might have a name that differs from what is on their ID. And as we've talked about, there are a lot of barriers to getting your ID changed. So the best you can do, let's see. We put preferred name in a name field and legal name in a no field. Preferred name will be the primary one used by the library. Yeah, and that's great. I think that, I can't remember if that's something we had discussed. The way our notes are in our system, I think has been a little bit of our issue, our issue is because people don't always think to check them or can't see them. We put preferred names in our alert section. This is great because I was going to ask you how you handled this anyway, so that's amazing. So if anybody else wants to chime in about this, I really appreciate that. So yeah, in terms of not collecting gender, our software defaults to NA for gender. You know, we just don't see a need for collecting it. Yeah, and so, you know, we do our best to make customers feel welcome. And right now what we've been telling people is, you know, we just try to be really welcoming. Yeah, and say, greet them by their name. We still do we'll put it in a note, you know, to the I hope other people will see it. And again, trying to build that relationship. Hopefully you'll remember if you see that customer again. Yeah, and somebody put preferred name seems like a good option for all patrons as well as people who are transgender. Lots of people go by nicknames. Absolutely. I've had this conversation with a lot of my colleagues, and I've even had somebody tell me that they go by a shortened version of their full name because of they have some trauma associated with their full name, but there's a lot of complications again in changing that, or even if you want to, I mean, let's be honest, names carry a lot of emotional weight and how we use them and go about them. So it's best when we can try to call people by, to honor what people want to be called. Anybody else have any comments on how it's handled in your ILS? Otherwise, we will move on to talking about restrooms. Sorry, we just saw somebody typing, so we're giving an opportunity, but okay. But we'll move on.
But yeah, also, I guess to kind of add on that too, like even if your system doesn't have an ideal way to like capture who someone is accurately in your database, I mean, always just emphasize that, you know, in your best way, customer service way, that you value them and that you do respect where they are, and you will address them by the name that they need to be addressed by. So yeah, moving swiftly along to talking about restrooms in our libraries. For many municipalities, we have anti-discrimination laws and ordinances that allow trans people to use public facilities that correspond to their gender identity. This includes Colorado and Denver, so it is a right that people have to use the restroom that matches their gender. And as we kind of also discussed, like 70% of trans people have reported being assaulted or harassed in a public restroom. So it's a really weird situation and can be very traumatic for a lot of people. But for us as employees, assume that people select the appropriate restroom. And I mean, obviously don't confront customers about their gender identity. If you do, assume they're in the wrong restroom. And kind of avoid assuming stuff about them and their gender identity in general. When you're pointing people toward the restroom too, we've also kind of noticed that it's helpful to just make a general description of where your restrooms are located. Like, oh, the restrooms are over there, without being like, oh, the women's restroom is over there. That also kind of has an opportunity to make an assumption about them that they might not like. And if an issue that does, I'm assuming, come up quite commonly, if another customer believes that someone is using a restroom inappropriately, clarify whether or not there's a behavior issue taking place. And here at DPL, we really emphasize that for so many situations. Like the question that we like to ask is, oh, is there a behavior issue taking place? And then we can address whatever is happening in the bathroom at that point. But I have had an interaction with customers that are like, oh, there's someone in the bathroom and they're not supposed to be there. And I mean, we can always remind them of our laws that we have here.
Yeah, and I see people chiming in about this is great when your bathrooms are in different locations to give the location of both. That's a really great workaround. Or if you have an all-gender bathroom, that's fantastic. And yeah, Christine asked if you have different laws in different states around this.
In our county's policies that we don't monitor restroom use. Yeah, definitely. And complaining customers are asked to respect other people's use of the bathroom. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. We try very hard to do generic bathroom locations. Oh, but your restrooms are on opposite sides. So it feels necessary to say, yeah, male, female on that side. Yeah. And it looks like you also have a gender neutral family bathroom.
Oh, come visit our state. Sorry, I'm I'm helping with restroom issues at our central library, which will be getting renovated in a few years. AG, I would love to know more about what you're doing with your inclusive restrooms. So if you want to add to that, because we are really trying to figure out, as I'm sure some of you maybe have run into, there is trying to figure out the balance between both privacy and security in public restrooms. In Denver, as a large urban library, we have some challenges around that. So as we think about renovating, we're really trying to figure out how we can make restrooms both private and safe. So,
Yeah.
and much more inclusive, like gender inclusive restrooms.
Yeah. And I also know this can be different if you have like a small branch or like a really big building like we do. Like there are a lot of varying challenges that come with just having a public and open space. Scrolling down. As far as Indiana goes, I'm not sure if there are clear-cut laws. Okay. Our library has non-gendered bathrooms. Oh, that's nice. I like that. I've seen libraries with gendered and gender-neutral bathrooms. Yeah. Our library has both gendered and gender-neutral single-occupant bathrooms. The campus I'm on has a unisex restroom on every building now, but not every floor. I also had that experience. Oh, AG is in Boulder. They can share. They're willing to share the work that they've done on their project. I'm very excited for you guys too. That's really cool. Yeah. That's super exciting, Boulder. But yeah, we've been trying to figure out, like Beck, you two have been working on a lot of challenges that have come with the planning that goes involved to make sure that, like they said, that you value both privacy and security.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yay! Yeah, and Christine has also offered to email stuff out, it looks like, from when AG was talking about what they're doing out there in Boulder for restrooms. So yeah, I'm glad this came up in our discussion because it's definitely a really relevant one right now.
Yeah. Me too. And so it sounds like the other people handle this in a similar way around behavior issues. And that's the thing, how you can always just kind of, de-escalate and redirect if a customer comes up to you and you just say, and you can simply just ask, be like, is there any behavior you're concerned about? And then state, it's always good to know your law. So if you can look that up for where you are, to be able to, because we can rely on the law to say, people are allowed to use the restroom that corresponds with their gender, and as long as there's no behavior issue, then that's okay.
Yeah, and if you are out of state, I would look up what your state regulations are surrounding bathroom use and trans inclusivity, because I know that it's incredibly varied in the language and the regulations that we have and the rights that we are allowed to outline to people. So keep that in mind too. But for us, it's easy. We have, a lot to refer to. But yeah, essentially, assume they're in the right restroom. If there's a behavior issue, then address the behavior issue. If, again, as we talked about, if a customer is, angry about that, then address that and inform them of our policies, as with anything else. And I'm going to now move on to our next situation that Beck will outline, and I'll keep posted on what AG has to say about their library as well. Oh yeah, wash your hands in the bathroom. We have that on our. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move on to talk about harassment, and this photo is courtesy of two of our hilarious coworkers who posed for this picture. So we want to give you some practical tools to potentially to address any potential harassment you see going on in the library. So here's our scenario. You are working in the children's section when you see a group of middle schoolers harassing another child. They are making unkind remarks about the child's appearance. You can tell this is not friendly teasing, and the bullied child keeps trying to move away, and the others continue to follow. At this point, take a minute, and we'd love to hear if you have thoughts about how to handle this particular situation. And we'll start trying to move along a little more quickly just because I'm mindful of time and I want to make sure everybody has a few minutes to ask questions at the end. And we will spend a little time to addressing how this is different if it's children versus adults as well. So just while we're waiting for some things to come through, I'll talk through this a little bit. You know, it's good to, here we go. Okay, so address the harassing children and remind them of the behavior policies that demand respect for individuals in the building. I'd say we don't tolerate this kind of behavior. I'd want to make sure that the bullied child is in a safer space. I would tell the kids the behavior is unacceptable, get them away from the bullied child, see if they are okay. Good. We actually address bullying in our patron code of contact for adults and children. If we address the situation and it continues, we ask the harassing party to leave. Follow your behavior policy regarding harassment. It's important for the harassed child to feel safe and protected. First offense, talk with the kids. Second offense, involve parents and short-term ban. These are really good, and it is. You want to make sure that the child who's being harassed feels safe. This has a little bit to do. I would have addressed the child being bullied and speak with them. It depends a little bit on how many staff you have available, because if there are two of you, it's possible that one can kind of go talk to the kid who's being bullied, and the other staff member can help sort of separate the other kids and talk to them a little more directly. Part of this has to do with what your relationship with these children currently is, because sometimes you can even take it as a bit of a teaching moment. Let's see, I have interrupted something similar to this a few times. I do step into the situation and talk about a prerequisite of using the library is respecting all within. If they can't honor that, then they have to leave. This also tends to be a good way to offer some reader's advisory for the bullies and bullied. That's great. I think that's a great suggestion. Definitely check up on the bullied child after asking the other children to go elsewhere. And that's really true. In terms of the child who's being bullied, what's really important here too is this is another situation where to not necessarily call that child out. So not go over to them and be like, oh my God, are you okay? That sounded so terrible. But to maybe just be like, hey, how are you? Do you need anything? If you don't know that child, introduce yourself. Just kind of give them an opportunity to talk to you if they want to talk to you, because sometimes kids really shut down in that moment. Sometimes they're too scared to talk to you, and just opening up a more normal line of conversation to help them feel supported and heard and that you're interested in them just as a person and not just because of this incident is important. And again, definitely addressing the kids who are doing the bullying, separating them. Yes, absolutely. Going to whatever your policies are, telling them that behavior is not appropriate is great. I do want to spend a minute on this if this is adults. So the thing that kind of stands out here is the ability you want to interrupt the harassment. If you see this going on with adults, obviously assess the safety of the security of the issue. If you feel unsafe to do this, keep that in mind. But there is a practice of just standing between somebody who's being harassed and the harasser and starting a normal conversation with the person being harassed. How are you today? What's going on? Can I help you find anything? Is sometimes enough to interrupt that interaction so that the harasser walks away. And then you can follow up with security. You can be like this adult was doing, you can, again, hopefully maybe tag team it, or also you first want to stop the harassment and then you can follow up on what your policies are to maybe have that person removed from the library for the day, depending on what's kind of going on. I'm going to go ahead and have us move on. These were all really good comments, just so we can get through to the next scenario, which will be around workplace.
Yeah.
And again, just our bullet points.
Workplace. All right. So in our last scenario, before we start wrapping up, we're going to discuss some strategies that we can use to be respectful of our colleagues in the workplace. So I will bring us to our next scenario, and I'll kind of read out what this is. So this one says that a library administrator is speaking with a supervisor about an employee who is in the process of a gender transition. They are doing their best to use the employee's correct pronouns. The two are discussing what is appropriate to communicate about the employee's transition. They decide to send an email to all staff, thinking that it will help the employee from being misgendered. They start talking about how to update the employee record and realize that there is no procedure for doing so, and that they will need to ask the employee. The supervisor also wonders if there is a need to notify customers, as the employee routinely leads programs, and the supervisor wants to reduce confusion. I see some typing happening already. Oh no is correct.
There's a lot of oh no in this situation.
There is, yeah, but I would like to see in this hypothetical, hopefully not accurate situation, what your thoughts are about this. Do not email all staff. Yikes, agreed. Let the employee communicate this as they choose. Do not just blanket announce it like this. Yeah, well said. Every situation is unique. Ask the staff member in a very caring way what the library can do to support them up front. Let them take the lead. Precisely. Ask the employee what they would prefer. Yeah. And yeah, all action should be up to the staff person. No, I feel like a staff-wide email without talking to the employee is a really bad idea. That's just outing someone, and that is not okay. Absolutely agreed. It would be best to ask the employee about their preferred method of communication. Yeah. Yes. Respect their needs and privacy. Yeah, all of y'all have some excellent input onto this, because there's a lot going on. But essentially, some things to keep in mind when respecting our coworkers around us. Like, if someone is going through a transition and you're their supervisor, let them lead that conversation with you. Don't make assumptions about them, what they need, what they want to do, because in this particular scenario, the employee is just being talked about and decisions are being made about them. There's no mention of them having any desire to do any of this or have any input in this conversation at all. So the main takeaway is if they want, also don't put the burden of what to do about updating the record on the person transitioning. I agree. Yes. Because I think that there's a lot of, like you said, burden pushed on people that can be differently supported in the workplace. And I guess that would do with your HR department and everything, and would have to come up with an inclusive way to support our trans coworkers. What else? See, a little more typing. Don't wait until the situation arises to create this process is agreed. Organizations should have procedures in place for supporting our transgender employees because at the end of the day, it supports meaningful diversity and inclusion and makes everyone feel welcome, because that also extends to us as well as customers. Ideally, all of this is discussed in the meeting where the employee tells you that they are transitioning with them. Yeah, and that's totally up to that employee and their decisions and what they want to do in the workplace. And also remember that employee, if they are transitioning, isn't entitled to explain anything to any of their coworkers either, and they're allowed to kind of do that in the way that they see best fit. Yeah, thank you for your input, everyone. And I'll briefly put up our little outline slide of the stuff that we all just talked about. But again, respect that employee's privacy, use their correct name and pronouns, like if that changes for them in the course of when you know them, just respect where they're at right now. Educate yourself about some stuff if that's relevant to your journey and your relationship with them, and establish supportive policies to help that employee in their transition.
Yeah, and it sounds like this is everybody's sort of on top of this in this group, but just because someone has decided to disclose with you what they're, the fact that they might be transitioning, their gender identity, that is not permission for you to tell other people. Like, they've chosen to take you into that sort of umbrella of privacy. And again, keeping in mind the sort of safety and security issues around this.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something else, and now I've forgotten what it was.
And especially customers. I know that was in that example as well. Like, don't tell customers information about them.
Well, and
Like-
also, just because they've told you, if they've chosen to disclose, disclose this to you, it is also then not permission to ask them invasive questions.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Oh, and there's also one question. If you slip up with a coworker's new name and pronouns, how should you handle that? I would suggest just kind of similarly to our other situation with a customer, where you would just apologize and then, address them by their name from then on out, and don't make too much of a escalated deal with it, but just know that you let them know that you are respecting them, and like showing that by apologizing quickly and then addressing them with their name.
yeah, and I mean, I can speak to this only from personal standpoint with friends and family in my life, where you treat it the same way, and people are generally gracious. If they're not, again, this kind of falls under the umbrella of a microaggression. So even if people get a little upset about it, don't so much take it personally as about, it's again, not so much about you in this one moment as it is like what people face day to day. So still just be like, I'm so sorry, I'm really working on it, and just move forward.
Yeah. I think it's good to ask the person when they disclose what kind of privacy they want to maintain. Yeah, that is a really good clarifying question, because if they have confided in you as a coworker, asking them where they're at with everyone else too, and how they want to approach that at work would be definitely useful. How do you talk to patrons who are asking about a fellow staff member's gender? The questions from the patron are nosy at best. Okay, any work around ideas that maintain customer service but respect privacy? Yeah,
I mean, I think some of this is like, if people, I think it's okay to say if another staff member or a customer brings this up, I think you can just say, that's really not our place to that's not really our business to discuss.
Mhm.
Like, you can just, politely kind of brush it off. And yeah, we'll maybe move on to our next slide that sort of wraps this up, and then we can let people ask questions.
Yeah, but like if that employee has chosen to like officially change their name and pronouns and stuff, maybe being like, oh yeah, that's my coworker with their name, and that's what their name is, and like
Yeah.
But yeah, making sure you respect their privacy too. And moving forward with our minutes.
So yeah, just final thoughts. We do have the resources available. This has been great. I feel like people have asked some really great questions and been really honest. And just then things to sort of remember, this is really just all about respect across the board. I want to circle it back to great customer service, and just remember that no one person should be the voice of any group. Like, if you know one person who's trans, one person who's trans. It's not the same experience for everyone. And also to emphasize, to seek out your own learning. This is hopefully a starter conversation for some of you, or giving some of you some other things to think about. And that there are a lot of resources out there. We have some of them on our handouts. We're providing you with some, but just kind of, keep going and keep kind of learning about this. And does anybody have any questions?
And AG just added a link to information about their bathrooms. So AG, with your permission, I am going to add that to the resources on the CSL and Session website. So thank you, that is great. If you do have additional questions, pop them in the chat, and I'm going to take us to our wrap-up slides really quickly. Once again, we did record today's session. And the archive will be available on the CSL In Session website, which I'm going to pop in the chat here again, along with all of the resources, so that you can come back and revisit it, share it with people as needed. On the screen, there also is a link to a survey. And so if you have just a moment, we would love to know what you thought about today's session, what really worked for you, what you would like to have seen differently. Are there other topics that we can provide information about? So if you take a minute to fill out the survey, I really do take a close look at those to see how we can continue to provide topics and information that interest you. And a huge kind of round of virtual applause for our presenters today. I think this was a very fabulous session. I really like all of the resources that they provided. If you haven't had a chance to look at them, they once again provide really good definitions and whatnot. All of those are available on the CSL In Session website. So I really want to thank Adrian and Beck for joining us today. And if you do have any last minute questions, we're more than, I'm speaking for them, we're more than happy to make sure that they get addressed before you leave today.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. But yeah, thanks guys for all coming out and attending our webinar. I hope it was helpful for everyone in that you have something to take back to your own library,
Yeah.
wherever you might be.
And please feel free to reach out to us if you have questions that occur to you after the fact. We're always happy to have conversations about this. So
Yeah, because we're all like trying to figure out stuff together
yeah.
for like all our libraries and stuff. So we definitely welcome conversation with everyone.
Yeah, we continue to learn too. So
yeah.
what do you do when you have staff that isn't supportive? This librarian was disgusted that I was taking this webinar. Oh wow. Okay. So that's a really good question. So, and I have to actually sort of reflect on that for a minute, because we're doing a lot of work around equity, diversity, and inclusion in our library. That looks like a lot. That's we're doing some racial equity work as well. The deal is it's turns of the wheel. Honestly, part of it is setting a standard. We're really lucky that we have very supportive leadership who a lot of these things, again, we fit into an umbrella of strong customer service, that this is the expectation we set. And so that's the way that we address it with people, is we're like, I don't really love saying this, you can feel how you feel in your personal life, but this is your expectation when you're at the library. And so having that leadership support to sort of back that up is really helpful. And you hope that your culture sort of shifts over time, that you can have small conversations with people. I mean, it happens in bite-sized chunks. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that addressing that situation has like so many different options you could take with that. Like, because it depends, of course, on your relationship with whatever that coworker, and addressing those like weird negative feelings that they seem to have expressed to you about that inclusive. But I don't know if this would be helpful, but if there was someone who felt that way about us doing this webinar, I would ask them, hey, why do you think that? Why do you think this isn't relevant to what we're doing as a library right now?
Yeah, sometimes.
And then, taking it from there. But that angers me too.
Yeah.
By the way. Oof. Wrinkle her nose, taking. Yeah. Okay, so the comment says, I had a coworker kind of wrinkle her nose when I told her what webinar I was taking, but I just reminded them that we are an all-encompassing establishment and that we have to remember to try to separate our personal feelings from our professional selves. That belief that it's all against God's plan, so inexcusable. Yeah, people can get extremely, aggressive with their thoughts on gender inclusion and stuff. And that can be really challenging to deal with, especially if you have to like work with someone every day. And
I think that's why, some of this stuff is hard to translate into a webinar. It's part of the reason we really, and Kim, I'd be happy to take this offline with you if we want to talk a little bit more about sort of your specific library environment and what potential exercises you might be able to introduce to coworkers. The assumptions exercise, when you're doing it face to face, sometimes is pretty helpful in terms of like just helping break things down for people a little bit more. And again, because sometimes we have said, like, we're not trying to get you to totally change your mind. We're trying to get you to shift your frame of reference so that you can provide good customer service.
And for a variety of things, I try to keep in mind that, oh, I don't have control over someone's internal feelings and how they see the world, but you can demand that they hold a level of respect around you. And especially at the workplace, there should be policies that support that too, about having respect for what we do together and our coworkers and customers.
Yeah.
And yeah, that hopefully should be an enforceable request to make of them, that they have that respect. King says, Kim, in all awkward situations, I found the value of being firm while modeling kindness and compassion. Yeah, don't compromise on your own boundaries, you know, and if you need someone to be more respectful, we definitely should ask that of them. But fighting fire with fire gets everyone burned. Yeah, it's good to be angry sometimes.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think what we try to model here for sure is that idea of just trying to encourage everyone to be a little more open-hearted and holding to this, the values of kind of what Denver Public Library and what library systems everywhere sort of purport to uphold. But it is hard when people have really strongly held beliefs.
Yeah. And I mean, ideally, if I had that conversation, I would strive to let them know that whatever way is best for that interaction, that hey, this isn't acceptable, to express in terms of what we're trying to all do together, and then taking it from there, I guess. But yeah, that I definitely, that situation I'm sure resonates with a lot of people in here, and for a variety of reasons too. So,
yeah.
Nice.
Well, thanks, guys, for spending that additional time kind of reframing what is a really important and hard question. So, Kim, thank you for asking that question, because I think that kind of gets to the nuts and bolts of what we are all doing. I did just notice that I had not yet put the resources up on the CSL in Session website. So I'm going to make sure that everything gets added along with the archive. And I think that this is a place to start having conversations at your library if there are things that you still think are important to address. The fact that you attended a webinar, what you've learned, passing on the slides and that kind of stuff, I think is a great way to talk to your supervisor, to talk to your department, that kind of thing in terms of starting these conversations. So once again, a huge thanks to our presenters for today's session, and thanks to all of you for taking the time out of your day to attend and to learn more about the topic.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah,
who's
thank
still
you
here.
again.
Yeah, thanks.